Today, we embark on a thrilling adventure set in the heart of the African forest. Get ready to meet a young hero chosen by the gods to wield ancient power and save his people from dark powers. Kukere and the Dwarves, the chosen warrior. The story as told by Afrikanza. But don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you are new for more captivating stories, legends, and history. In the heart of Africa, where the sun dipped into the horizon and painted the sky with hues of crimson and gold, there existed a village called Akata. It was a village steeped in tradition and mythology, where the air was sweet with the scent of blooming flowers and the sound of drums echoed through the night. In this village, a child was born with a remarkable gift. Kukere, a boy with cowrie shells clenched in his tiny fist. The villagers gathered around, awestruck by the sight, and whispered among themselves about the prophecy that had been foretold. They called him the Wonder Boy, and his birth was celebrated with feasts and dances that lasted for days. As Kukere grew, he exhibited extraordinary strength and agility, leaving his peers in awe. His mother, Pimpim, was overjoyed by his son's remarkable abilities. But his father, Katongo, was worried, fearing that Kukere's gifts might attract unwanted attention. On one fateful day, when Kukere was just 4 years old, his mother took him to the farm, where she laid him down on a colorful cloth to sleep. But when she turned her back, Kukere had vanished into thin air. The villagers searched far and wide, scouring the forest and bushes, but there was no sign of the Wonder Boy. Katongo lost hope, but Pimpim refused to give up. She spent every waking moment weeping and praying for her son's safe return. The chief of the village, a wise and just man named King Kuka, announced a reward for anyone who could bring Kukere back home. Unknown to the villagers, Kukere had been taken by a group of dwarves who lived deep within the forest. These dwarves were not like the ones from European fairy tales. They were steady and proud, with skin as black as coal and hair that flowed like the rivers. They lived in a magnificent kingdom, hidden behind a waterfall, where the air was sweet with the scent of honey and the sound of laughter echoed through the halls. The dwarfs were led by a wise and powerful king named Mahindra, who had been watching Kukere from afar. He believed that the Wonder Boy was the chosen one, destined to fulfill an ancient prophecy that would bring peace and prosperity to the land. And so Kukere began his journey, learning the ways of the dwarves and discovering the secrets of his own destiny. Mahindra took Kukere under his wing, teaching him many magic tricks and skills. Kukere learned how to make flowers bloom with just a touch, how to communicate with animals, and how to harness the power of the elements. As Kukere grew in power and knowledge, Mahindra revealed to him the prophecy that had brought him to their kingdom. "The time of great darkness is upon us," Mahindra said, his voice low and serious. "But you, Kukere, have been chosen to bring light to our world. You possess a power that has been hidden for centuries, a power that will help us defeat the forces of evil that seek to destroy our land." Kukere listened intensely, his mind racing with questions. What power did he possess? What forces of evil was Mahindra talking about? Meanwhile, back in the village, Pimpim wept and prayed for her son's safe return. She had lost all hope, but she refused to give up. She knew that Kukere was out there, somewhere, and she was determined to find him. But little did she know, Kukere was not the only one in danger. A dark force that had been lurking in the shadows was closing in, and Kukere was about to find himself in the midst of a great battle. After 6 months in the forest, Kukere was returned to his village by the dwarves. They appeared in the dead of night, their appearance unseen by the villagers. They stood before Kukere, their eyes shining with a deep wisdom. "It is time for you to return home, Kukere," Mahindra said, his voice low and gentle as usual. "But remember, we are not done with you. We will see you again someday." With that, the dwarves vanished into the night, leaving Kukere standing alone in the village square. The villagers who had given up hope of ever seeing Kukere again were overjoyed by his return. His parents, Pimpim and Katongo, were overjoyed, hugging their son tightly and tears of happiness streaming down their faces. The villagers threw a big party to celebrate Kukere's return with music, dancing and feasting that lasted long into the night. But as the night wore on, a strange and ominous storm cloud gathered over the village. The winds began to howl, and the rain started to pour down in torrents. The villagers, frightened by the storm, huddled together in fear. But Kukere, remembering the lessons he had learned from the dwarves, stood up and raised his hands to the sky. To the amazement of the villagers, the storm began to subside, the winds dying down and the rain slowing to a gentle patter. The villagers stared at Kukere in awe, unsure of what to make of his newfound powers. As the night wore on, Kukere demonstrated more of the skills he had learned from the dwarves. He lit fires with his fingers, spoke to animals, and even made the stars shine brighter in the sky. The villagers were both amazed and terrified by Kukere's powers. Some of them saw him as a blessing, a gift from the gods. Others saw him as a curse, a harbinger of darkness and danger. As the villagers debated Kukere's fate, Pimpim and Katongo stood by their son, profound of his newfound powers and determined to protect him from those who would seek to harm him. But as they stood there, a dark figure watched from the shadows, its eyes fixed on Kukere with a malevolent glare. The dark force that had been lurking in the shadows had finally found its target, and it would stop at nothing to claim Kukere's powers for itself. The king of the village, King Kuka, upon hearing of Kukere's gifts, invited him to the palace to visit him anytime he wanted. The king was so impressed with Kukere that he took him as his own son, catering for him and even consulting him on certain decisions because of his wisdom, despite his tender age. Years passed, and Kukere grew into a powerful and wise young man. On his 15th birthday, Kukere had a dream in which he saw Mahindra, the king of the dwarves, warning him of a dark spirit that sought to destroy him. "Beware of the dark spirit, Kukere," Mahindra said in the dream. "It seeks to claim your power for itself. You must be righteous and free from sin, and you must learn to use your powers wisely, not for show, but to solve problems and bring peace to the land." Kukere woke up from the dream, feeling shaken and disturbed. He knew that he had to be careful, for the dark spirit was real, and it would stop at nothing to claim his powers. Kukere couldn't shake off the feeling of unease that had been growing inside him for weeks. The dream he had on his 15th birthday had become a recurring nightmare, haunting him every night. In the dream, he saw a dark force seeking him, its presence filling with an unspeakable terror. But every time the dark force closed in, Mahindra and his dwarves appeared, standing bravely between Kukere and the darkness. Their presence gave Kukere the strength to face his fears, and he knew that he could always count on them to support him. However, the troubles in the village were all too real. A deep calamity had befallen the land, bringing with it famine, disease, and death. The once thriving crops were withering away, the animals were falling ill, and the villagers were crying out for help. The chief priest of the land, a wise and aged man named Babaolo, revealed that the calamity was caused by a dark spirit that had taken residence in the evil forest. The spirit, known as the Devourer, was feeding on the life force of the land, leaving destruction and despair in its wake. Babaolo declared that the only way to lift the curse was for a brave warrior to venture into the evil forest and defeat the Devourer. But the villagers were too afraid to take on the quest, fearing the unknown dangers that lurked in the forest. Kukere, however, was undaunted. He had always felt a deep connection to the natural world, and the suffering of the villagers and animals weighed heavily on his heart. He knew that he had to act no matter the danger. "I will do it," Kukere said, his voice firm and resolute. "I will go into the evil forest and defeat the Devourer." King Kuke's face lit up with pride and admiration. "Ah, Kukere, my son, you are truly a brave and noble soul. I have no doubt that you will succeed where others fear to tread." But Kukere's parents, Pimpim and Katongo, were overcome with emotion. They had always known that their son was special, but they had never imagined that he would be called upon to face such danger. "Kukere, our son, please be careful," Pimpim cried, tears streaming down her face. "We don't want to lose you." Katongo nodded in agreement, his eyes filled with worry. "Yes, Kukere, you are our only child. We cannot bear the thought of losing you." King Kuka placed a reassuring hand on Kukere's shoulder. "Do not worry, Pimpim and Katongo. Kukere will be safe. He has the heart of a warrior and the spirit of a lion." The king then handed a sword to Kukere, its blade shining in the sunlight. "Take this sword with you, Kukere. It has been passed down through generations of our kings, and it will serve you well on your quest." He also gave Kukere a small pouch containing food and water. "Take this with you, Kukere. You will need it on your journey." Kukere took the sword and the pouch, feeling a sense of determination and purpose. He knew that he was ready to face whatever dangers lay ahead. Kukere stood at the edge of the evil forest, his heart pounding with anticipation and fear. He had never been this far from home before, and the darkness of the forest seemed to stretch out before him like an endless void. But he stilled himself and took a deep breath, remembering the words of Mahindra and the trust that King Kuka had placed in him. He grasped the hilt of his sword tightly and stepped forward into the unknown. The forest was dense and foreboding, the trees twisting and turning in ways that seemed impossible. Kukere had to push aside thick curtains of vines and fight his way through thorny thickets, and all the while keeping his senses alert for any sign of danger. On the third day of his journey, Kukere's food was stolen by a flock of evil birds that had been spying on him. They swooped down, their beaks snapping, and made off with his pouch of food. Kukere was left with nothing to eat, and he had to rely on his knowledge of the forest to find berries and roots to sustain him. But the biggest challenge came on the sixth day, when Kukere encountered a creature that was half man, half spirit. The creature was tall and imposing, its body a mass of swelling shadows and its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. "You should not have come here, Kukere," the creature hissed, its voice like a rusty gate. "This is a place of darkness, and you are no match for the powers that dwell here." Kukere stood tall, his sword at the ready. "I am not afraid of you," he said, his voice steady. "I have come to defeat the Devourer, and I will not be deterred." The creature sneered, its face twisting into a grotesque mask. "We shall see about that," it said, and launched itself at Kukere. The battle was fierce and intense. the two combatants clashing in a flurry of steel and shadow. But Kukere was determined and focused, using all of his skills and training to gain the upper hand. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Kukere emerged victorious, the creature dissipating into nothingness at his feet. He stood panting, his soul trembling with exhaustion, but a sense of pride and accomplishment swelling in his chest. He continued on his journey, and on the 7th day, he finally came upon the abode of the Devourer. It was a towering fortress of black stone, its walls covered in twisted carvings and its gates guarded by a pair of massive 3-headed dogs. Kukere knew that he had finally reached his destination. He steeled himself, took a deep breath, and stepped forward, ready to face whatever lay within. Kukere stood before the fortress of the Devourer, his heart pounding with anticipation and fear. He called out to the Devourer, challenging him to come out and face him. The Devourer laughed, a loud booming sound that seemed to shake the very foundations of the forest, but Kukere couldn't see him. "Show yourself, coward," Kukere shouted, his voice echoing off the walls of the fortress. And then, to Kukere's shock and horror, a familiar face appeared before him. It was none other but King Kukere, the man who had taken him in and treated him like a son. Kukere's mind reeled as he tried to process what he was seeing. King Kukere, the man he had trusted and admired, was the Devourer. "You are the one who is behind all the calamity in our village," Kukere accused, his voice trembling with anger and betrayal. King Kukere, or rather the Devourer, sneered at Kukere. "You are just a foolish boy," he said. "You think you can defeat me? I have the power of the ancient ones at my command." Kukere drew his sword, ready to face the Devourer, but despite his bravery, he was no match for the Devourer's power. The Devourer struck him down, and Kukere lay on the ground, weak and helpless. Just as all seemed lost, Kukere remembered the incantation that Mahindra taught him. It was a message to call on the dwarves whenever he was in need. Kukere spoke the words of the incantation, hoping against hope that the dwarves would hear him. And then, to his amazement, Mahindra and his fellow dwarves appeared before him. Together, Kukere and the dwarves combined their power and launched a fierce attack against the Devourer. The battle was intense, with spells and swords clashing in a flurry of light and sound. But in the end, it was Kukere who struck the final blow, using the Devourer's own sword to cut off his head. The Devourer let out a deafening scream as he dissipated into nothingness. Kukere hugged the dwarves, grateful for their timely intervention. Together, they made their way back to the village, where they were greeted as heroes. The villagers gathered around, eager to hear the tale of Kukere's bravery, and when they heard the story of how King Kukere had been the Devourer all along, they were shocked and outraged. But Kukere's bravery and selflessness had earned him a special place in the hearts of the villagers, and so, in a grand ceremony, Kukere was crowned the new king of the village, the youngest ever in their history. Kukere's coronation as the new king of the village marked the beginning of a new era of peace and prosperity. The villagers, who had suffered for so long under the Devourer's rule, rejoiced at their newfound freedom. As king, Kukere ruled with wisdom and compassion, using his powers to heal the land and restore the balance of nature. He worked tirelessly to rebuild the village, using his knowledge of the forest to create new homes, farms and infrastructure. The villagers prospered under Kukere's leadership, and the land flourished once more. The forest, once a place of darkness and evil, became a symbol of hope and renewal. Kukere never forgot the lessons he had learned from Mahindra and the other dwarves, and he made sure to honor their memory by ruling with integrity and justice. Years passed and Kukere became a legendary king, revered by his people for his bravery, wisdom and kindness. And though he faced many challenges during his reign, he always remained true to himself and his values. One day, as Kukere sat on his throne, surrounded by his people, he looked out at the forest and smiled. He knew that he had fulfilled his destiny and that the land was finally at peace. And so, Kukere's story came full circle, a tale of courage, perseverance, and the power of good over evil. Now that's the end of Kukere and the Dwarves, the chosen warrior. I hope you enjoyed this epic tale of courage, magic, and adventure. If you did, please let us know in the comments below. Share your thoughts, your favorite moments, and what you learned from this story. Don't forget to like and share this video with your friends and family, and subscribe to our channel for more captivating stories, legends, and history. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.